All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the Transportation Safety Commission to order, if y'all are ready.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're ready. All right. So, call to order. We do a roll call.
Commissioner Griffith,
Present.
Commissioner Christensen,
Present.
Commissioner Beaudry,
Present.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Present.
Commissioner Mueller,
Yep.
and Commissioner Fitting.
Present.
Thank you.
Present.
All right. And our first order of business here is to approve the minutes of our last two meetings, it looks like. So I guess we'll start with the March 12th minutes. Hopefully folks are able to access those. Is there any?
Move adoption.
Okay. Is anyone second?
Second.
Okay. All those in.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Unanimous. And then how's about the, what are we looking at then? The April 9th minutes.
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
I will second.
Fantastic. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Cool. Any opposed? Nope. All right. Unanimous. And then we will open it up for public comment. This section of the meeting provides the public an opportunity to address the commission on any subject not appearing on the agenda. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Transportation Safety Commission cannot take action on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Any request that requires action will be set by the commission to a future agenda or will be referred to staff for review and action. And each person will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Do we have anybody here in person for general public comment?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's green. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Raylena Crixton. I work as the Real Estate Development Director for ACGC, Adams Commercial General Contracting. I also serve as the community liaison for the company as well. Today, I wanted to bring up residential and business parking passes. I know that metered parking is on the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure that this was a non-agenda item and it was good for public comment in this section. Okay. So first off, thank you. The pilot program is much needed and appreciated. I did want to come here today because it is in the pilot program to offer some feedback about how it's going and make some requests for future consideration. So in the pilot program right now, both residential and business parking passes apply to the lots, which is great. But I was hoping that there could be some consideration for an allocation of street parking if you do hold those passes. There's been, there's life circumstances that people have, as well as just logistic things. For example, one of the residents that lives in the new building on 2nd and E, he has a young daughter who is, I've seen on multiple occasions him carrying her like a briefcase because she's, having a meltdown, and the logistics of being a single parent, going out and moving your car every 2 hours and not having the mental capacity to look for a lot parking space when there is street parking available. It's a single use case, but we can apply this to other things as well. Logistically, for work that has to be done on our building or for the residents, many of our tradesmen have the tools in the back of their truck. And so, again, logistically, parking in the dirt lot isn't really feasible when you might be working on carpentry 1 hour and then plumbing on the next. So having some sort of provision, whether it's an allocation of 4 hours for business parking or 8 hours for residential, is just something that I'd like to be considered and discussed, or any kind of not necessarily special use case, but things that we've found while using the parking pass that might be nice to incorporate into the pilot program. Thank you.
And then do we have anybody on Zoom who is interested in doing public comment? Nobody? All right, then. Well, we actually have no... Oh, then I will close the public comment period. We have no old business or new business today. Our main agenda item is a report from Mark Thomas Consulting on the bike plan. So I will hand it over.
Yeah, I'll give a brief introduction here for our team that's been working on the bike plan as they get ready to present. Yeah, so we're at the point, we've been working on the bike master plan for the last year or so. This commission has a subcommittee who's been a part of that process. We're now at the point in the process where we're nearing a draft master plan. So we wanted to bring, kind of present to the Safety Commission everything that we've kind of done up to this point, and then kind of report out on what our next steps are as we move forward with finalizing the master plan and look forward to taking it to the City Council. So with that, we have Jay Riddle with Mark Thomas, who's been one of the consultants working on this plan. She's here to present today. I believe we also have Paul Martin's here as well. They've been the two consultants who are helping us out with this plan, and they're going to present now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay and Paul.
Thanks, Jesse. We have a presentation prepared for the Transportation Safety Commission today. I'm not sure if it's currently on screen over there. I don't see it on my end of the Zoom.
So it doesn't look like, if you're sharing your screen, Jay Riddle, it doesn't look like it's coming up on your screen. So
oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize that I had screen sharing capacity. Let me go ahead and get that set up. Screen one share. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
it's not full size. It's still showing the kind of the. There you go. If that's the best you can do, we'll take it.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully everything is visible. If anything is cut off on the upcoming screens, just let me know and I can exit the full screen views to show the full frame. But yes, thank you for that introduction, Jesse. My name is Jay Riddle, and I'm the Deputy Project Manager on the Eureka Bike Plan, and I work for Mark Thomas. We're also joined by Paul Martin, who is the Project Manager on behalf of Mark Thomas. Mark Thomas is a civil engineering firm, and we have practices statewide all across California. So with that, we are very pleased to present to you the work that we've completed on the Eureka Bike Plan. And I'll take you to the agenda slide now. There we go. So we're going to be rolling through the introductions, which we've just done, a bit on the project background, some of the community engagement that we've completed, how we identified the proposed corridors for bicycle facility improvements, and the method that we used for prioritizing which of those corridors advance further in the project. We also touch on the non-infrastructure programs and policies that are included in the report and the next steps as part of this plan. To start off the project, we reviewed adopted planning documents locally and regionally. And the intention for this was to ensure that the recommendations that we were developing in the Eureka Bike Plan were consistent with and complementary with formerly adopted planning documents and planning efforts that have been completed so far. We wanted to make sure that we understood the current context and the future planned context so that we are not being redundant or making any recommendations that conflict with the goals and objectives of these past planning documents. Then we began our existing conditions review. So on the left is a list of pretty typical existing conditions that are analyzed in this phase of the project development. On the right is a sample graphic of 3 data layers that are utilized in the analysis, in the existing conditions analysis. What we're looking at in the image on the right are the existing and planned bikeways. The dashed lines indicate that they are planned. The existing lines, or the solid lines, indicate that they are existing. We compare those with the bicycle collision history. So we have a scale, a color gradient from red to white, or red to green and then white, indicating the level of injury that was inflicted upon a bicyclist who was involved in a collision with a vehicle. And then we also look at things like nearby schools so that we can gain an understanding of where there are traffic-related conflicts occurring, where those overlap with existing or non-existing bicycle facilities. And then particularly, you know, if those surround schools, we want to ensure that we're doing what we can in making planning efforts to implement some safety treatments near schools in order to provide safe routes to schools for students K through 12 who may be walking or bicycling to school. So those are some examples. We developed a project task force that consisted of members from the chart on the right. We so far have met with the project task force a total of 5 times. We will meet with them a 6th time to receive their feedback on the draft report that we have developed so far. Members of the project task force are contacted primarily on behalf of the agencies that they work for. We involve project task force members who are knowledgeable about the existing conditions and planning processes within the city of Eureka, and who can report back on upcoming plans within an agency, can speak on behalf of an agency what their priorities are, and this helps us understand what is best needed before we advance the project to go to public feedback. So the project task force has been extremely beneficial for the project development and has helped orient the project in certain directions that have been extremely beneficial for identifying what the needs and concerns of the community are. The first phase of 3 of public engagement that we conducted primarily focused on existing conditions. So we presented our findings in the existing conditions analysis and then collected feedback from the general public if that aligned with their understanding of the barriers and opportunities that existed within the existing bicycle facility network. So these were the 4 activities that we hosted as part of phase 1. The walk audit was actually combined with project task force meeting number 3. So that event included staff from Mark Thomas, staff from the city of Eureka, project task force members, and members of the general public. We engaged with the students at St. Bernard's Elementary Academy. We conduct engagement with students because they provide a lens and a perspective that we don't typically receive when we conduct public meetings. Students generally don't show up to, city council meetings on average. So we were able to receive their feedback on challenges that they face when they're trying to travel throughout the city of Eureka. And up until age 16, for the most part, none of them are driving, so they're reliant on walking and bicycling. So they have very keen insights as to where they feel comfortable or uncomfortable walking. We also hosted a survey online. It received 356 responses. Our project task force members supported the survey by distributing the notification or the promotion of it within their networks. That was extremely helpful. And then we hosted a virtual community meeting to present the existing conditions and collect feedback from the public on where they were interested in seeing bicycle improvements. The second phase focused on project recommendations. So at this point in time, we had identified a series of roadway corridors and then potential bikeway facilities that would be complementary on those roadway corridors. And later in the presentation, we'll go into how we identified those different types of treatments per roadway corridor. But so this phase essentially focused on presenting what those potential improvements could look like, that built out bicycle network. And we collected feedback from the community on, which corridors they thought were the most important from their perspective. We collected feedback on which corridors they would support the removal of on-street parking in order to provide a more enhanced or upgraded bicycle facility. And throughout this process, the roadway corridors and the improvements actually were revised according to what we heard. So some of the corridors that maybe made a left turn on one street then were revised to make a left turn on the next street over, just based on how people wanted to bicycle throughout the city of Eureka. And we also added some additional corridors based on repeat feedback that we heard. So for example, looking at 6th Street, more people wanted to see enhancements extended further east on 6th Street. So we incorporated that feedback into the Eureka bike plan. So we had a virtual community meeting, at which point we walked through each corridor by corridor with the community, and at that time launched this public engagement survey, which was hosted through Mentimeter. And throughout the virtual community meeting, participants were provided like the same corridors that they were seeing on screen on their cell phones to go ahead and provide their feedback live. At the in-person open house, we had an abbreviated version of that virtual community meeting, but we had all the information from the slides printed out on posters, and city staff and Mark Thomas staff was there engaging with the public, discussing the different benefits of different corridors, hearing the concerns from the community, and incorporating those into the project recommendations. Phase 3 was focused on implementation and next steps. So on June 28th, the project team conducted a tabling activity at the Friday night market. We had 4 educational boards. Was it 4? 5, sorry. We had 4, what was bike number? 4. We had the proposed bikeway network printed out large scale for people to review, comment on, provide their feedback, point out any locations where they were interested in seeing some additional bicycle facilities. We had an educational graphic on the new improvements that have been implemented on H Street and I Street, so those buffered bike lanes. And these educational graphics essentially were isometric drawings, such as what you see on the right of this slide, with some call outs as to what the facility is called and how to safely use the facility as both a bicyclist and a motorist. So we had that for H Street and I Street to help people get a little bit more comfortable with those new enhancements. And then we also created the same sort of drawings for C Street Bicycle Boulevard, which is currently funded for construction. So that's actually what we're seeing on the right are the C Street Bicycle Boulevard treatments at a couple locations. So this was a project that the community was excited to hear about. A lot of these treatments that were included on the educational graphic are a bit newer, so people were interested in talking about them, how to use them, how that benefits bicyclists, how it calms traffic. And we received a lot of feedback that was very positive. From our understanding of that night, a lot of people really do want to walk and bicycle along C Street, but feel that the traffic speeds are a bit high. And then we also had a graphic and a map on the upcoming Beta Zoo Trail project, including a timeline of the past city and organizational efforts from 2000 through 2024. And I can say that the community was also very excited to see that project and engage with that informational board and point out locations where they were interested in seeing on-street connections to the upcoming trail. So now we're getting into the corridor identification process. So the state of California, per the Manual on Uniform Traffic Devices, recognizes 4 primary types of bikeways, which are shown on the screen. So the recommendations that we've developed, for the most part, fit into each of these 4 categories, overarching. Although, as is written in the report, as the city begins to advance the designs of different corridors further, there's opportunities for these additional enhancements that will work within each of these types of corridors. And so in the next couple slides, we will preview what a few of those additional enhancements look like. But before we get there, I want to mention that we conducted a level of traffic stress analysis for the city of Eureka. So a level of traffic stress analysis is essentially a method of measuring the level of stress that a bicyclist feels or experiences on a certain corridor. And with the data that was available within the city of Eureka, this was primarily based on the number of motor vehicle travel lanes, the posted speed limit, and then the type of bicycle facility, and then the details on that bicycle facility, such as exactly how wide the bicycle lane was, etc. So this graphic we created specifically for the city of Eureka with examples on what a level of stress facility from a 0 through a 5 looks like. So like, for example, LTS 0 is based on the waterfront trail, whereas LTS 5 is based a little more closely on something like Broadway in the southern part of the city. These were the results that we garnered from the LTS analysis. Within these results, we did account for the projects by Caltrans and by the city of Eureka that had been funded through construction. We wanted to ensure that we weren't being redundant with any of the improvements that were already guaranteed to advance. So for example, C Street is shown as though the bicycle boulevard improvements are already existing, so that we don't spend too much time looking at a corridor right there adjacent to it when we know that there's going to be some network improvements on that roadway. So what we see primarily is a bit higher level of stress in the southwest area of town. This is primarily due to higher posted speed limits. We see the Caltrans couplet, Broadway, 4th and 5th Street are a bit higher stress for bicyclists. And then just south of that, 6th and 7th Street are a little bit more comfortable, but still have a higher level of traffic stress rating. So you kind of start to get this picture of a network barrier right there through just south of downtown, and understanding that many cyclists or many citizens want to access downtown and access the waterfront, as we heard in the user surveys. We definitely were focused on providing some connections that would get you to a bicycle facility that would get you up to the key destinations or south to the key destinations with a low level of traffic stress. So from the level of traffic stress, we had what we called the preliminary identified corridors. So just looking at the LTS network map, we identified some areas within the city of Eureka where there would be benefit in providing bicycle enhancements in order to help create a full network in which people could access all parts of the city of Eureka. Then in follow-up to that, Paul Martin and myself rented e-bikes, electric bicycles, within the city of Eureka. And we rode through the city of Eureka for about 3 days. traveling first along those preliminary identified corridors and then traveling on adjacent parallel roadways to compare side by side which corridor would be the best suited to carry a enhanced bicycle facility. We were also led by recommendations of the project task force for additional corridors to look into. Members of the project task force joined the ride on the third day that we were there. So in the end, we had identified 17 different corridors along with which type of overarching 4 categories of bicycle facility that would best suit that roadway. For the most part, within the city of Eureka, the roadway widths are pretty similar to one another. So in order to balance the different uses of the roadway, there are a lot of Class 3 bicycle boulevards that have been proposed. The majority of them are Class 3 bicycle boulevards, and that is due to avoiding having to remove on-street parking in order to accommodate a brand new bicycle facility, such as an on-street bike lane or an on-street cycle track. We have made recommendations where there are existing bike lanes for bicycle lane enhancements, which we'll get into in a bit, so that because the roadways with bicycle lanes we already understand can accommodate that sort of facility. And then there's recommendations for Class 4's cycle tracks, which require a little bit more space. So where we could, we aligned these with the wider roadways and with roadways that already don't have on-street parking. And then a few Class 1 off-street trails where it would complete the network. So these are some of the examples of the additional treatments that can be added to different bicycle facilities in order to further calm traffic, lower the stress level for bicyclists, and just really prioritize the bicyclist path of travel through that corridor. So for Class 3 bicycle boulevards, things like mini traffic circles, traffic diverters, and intersection crossing treatments are all beneficial. So as the city chooses to advance different corridors for design, of course, at that time, they will take a closer look at the corridor and identify where different types of treatments would be best suited based on the existing conditions of the roadway. These are only 3 examples, but the report goes into more detail with a full toolbox of treatments that are either vertical or horizontal, but overall really promote the comfort and safety of the bicyclist. So Class 2 lane enhancements are different treatments that can be layered on top of an existing Class 2 bicycle lane. What we have shown here are primarily pavement and lane markings and color, which helps increase the visibility of the bicyclists to motorists that are on the same corridor. But there are also things like vertical elements like protected intersections that have been considered, as well as some traffic signal operations that could be considered for different corridors that have bicycle lanes on them, such as bicycle detection and actuation, in which the traffic signal recognizes when a bicyclist is cued in the intersection and will turn green for them, because oftentimes bicyclists, they are not able to actuate the signal on their own without waiting for a vehicle. But again, the toolbox goes into more detail about what the different enhancements are for each facility. And then here are a few examples of Class 4 and Class 1, which are similar facilities in terms of the level of comfort that they provide to bicyclists. So we included them in the same slide, but I also want to touch on the elevated or suspended bridges. Throughout community engagement, we also collected feedback from participants on where they would be interested in seeing something like this, which would help them connect through the sloughs and the gulches within the city. So then we have the corridor prioritization. So we used 6 different metrics that are listed on the left to go ahead and assign value and then score the corridors because we were starting off with 17. And with the resources available, staff resources and everything, you can't necessarily always implement all 17 right away. So we were aiming toward identifying the top 5 corridors that would score well. And when I say score well, I mean would be competitive in the eyes of the state and federal governments when it comes to providing grant funding to design and implement these different corridors. So we led with bikeway level of traffic stress. So we did a cross comparison of the original level of traffic stress rating, and then we looked at what that corridor would be rated with that facility implemented. Public feedback was everything that we heard from the community at the virtual community meetings, in-person engagement activities, and then public surveys. Ease of implementation, it's the amount of complexity involved, how challenging the design process might be, and the permitting process as well. So really looking toward prioritizing more of those low-hanging fruit type projects. Trips served is primarily based on the estimated number of households and residents that surrounded a facility. When you're leaving home from bicycle day to day, your destination might change from shop to work, office, etc. But your trip is always going to start and end in the home. So we wanted to utilize that data to ideally capture the most amount of bicyclists as possible. And then crash history was based on police reported collision data. And this was a gradient based on the level of injury that was caused to the bicyclist. So essentially, the corridor was prioritized higher if it had more instances of more severe injuries that had occurred. And then equity. So we utilized 4 different metrics of equity that are based on the California Active Transportation Program and what they recognized as a disadvantaged community. So we essentially analyzed the 17 corridors as though they were being submitted to that state grant funding application, and then assigned a value to indicate how well it would score if it were submitted for a grant application. And these are our prioritization results of the 17 corridors. And these are now listed in order of 1st to 17th based on how well they scored. So essentially Henderson and Harris Street from our findings are providing enhanced bicycle facilities on that corridor would be the most likely of all 17 to receive grant funding from the California Active Transportation Program based on the methodology in the last slide. So the top 5 corridors in the prioritization methodology have been reviewed and discussed amongst the project team, and those are now being advanced for 30% concept designs. When submitting for grant funding, agencies are, I don't know about expected, but I don't know the right word to use, sort of encouraged, I want to say, to incorporate some draft concept designs and some cost estimates to demonstrate that they have invested time into looking closer into this corridor, vetting the feasibility of it, and have an understanding of the capital cost and level of effort that would be involved in bringing this project concept all the way through implementation. So the top 5 corridors are listed here on the screen, and what we're seeing in the example graphic is 3rd Street at the intersection of State Route 255. So there's an existing pedestrian crosswalk there, and so we have drafted some improvements around it. And these draft concept plans are not currently finalized. These are still in the development process. The project report will also include, as an appendices, the non-infrastructure programs and policies. On screen are some examples of the different types of programs and policies that are being proposed for consideration at a time when the city has the resources and capacity to coordinate and program those different types of programs and policies. Each one is on an individual case-by-case basis, and some may be more feasible than others, at which point the city can determine if it is a right fit for the community at that time, or reserve it for later if choosing to implement. So our next steps for the Eureka Bike Plan include finalizing those 30% concept design plans for the top 5 corridors. For the bike plan report, we have the draft currently is within city staff hands, so they're in their review process, and we'll provide Mark Thomas their comments and feedback. We plan to discuss the draft report with the project task force and receive their feedback at project task force number 6, which will be the final one of the project development process. And then we anticipate having the final report available for the city in August of this year. Board review and approval. We've actually had additional discussions with city staff since the development of this presentation. So August 20th may or may not be changing to September 3rd. Just want to put that out there. But the next step for board and review approval includes us presenting this project to City Council for adoption. And I think that is the end of my presentation. We have the project website listed here underneath the project logo. My email is on screen if you have any questions or comments and follow-up. There is also a dedicated project website project email listed there, and the city project manager's name. So Jay, thank you. And that's the last slide of my presentation.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, just really want to again bring back to, this is as staff, we feel very lucky to have had, we were able to get grant funding for this project and be able to bring on a consultant team to help us, who have, an expertise in non-motorized transportation, planning and engineering. So that's a big benefit to the staff because we don't have all the answers for everything. And these consultants, they work across the state of California, other states as well, and they really have a much better view of what's happening, what's what the the cutting edge is, I guess, so to speak, and what we can do. So we feel very lucky to have them on our team and appreciate their effort they put into it. You can tell they really cared about our community and wanted to do a good job for our community. But with that, I think we'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions for anybody from Mark Thomas? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. First, I want to say I really appreciate that y'all actually rode your bikes down these proposed ways. That's that's major. And I just wanted to add, I saw that one of the top contenders was Harris Street and Henderson as a corridor. And I'd just really like to encourage the city to potentially work with the county because there's also that intersection that I think it's Waldorf and Harris. That's technically county, but it is also a very dangerous intersection, in my opinion, with the way people come out of that parking lot. So if we're considering that corridor, especially all the way to Redwood Acres, I'd love to see, coordination with the county on that level, especially, if you're going to Myrtletown, that's how you have to go. Anyway, but I really appreciate the work and that's gone into this plan. Thank you.
So I also really appreciate that you rode your bikes around Eureka. That is something a lot of people are not willing to do to inform their decisions. I did want to know why the student engagement was with St. Bernard's, but not with Eureka High or with either of the middle schools.
Yeah, and I'll field that one. It was really came down to we did want to have as much engagement with various schools around. It became a challenge to just. It was really a scheduling challenge to get them board, to get the right people at the school districts on board. So I don't want to. It wasn't. Anybody was saying no, we don't want to be a part of the plan. It really came down to a challenge of getting in touch with the right people at the right time. St. Bernard's, the folks there were very enthusiastic about being a part of it and coordinating with us in order to set that up and schedule with the students to be able to do that. And since then, we've had more communication with Zane Middle School and working with them. But yeah, it was really came down to logistics and the challenges there, just given the timing with the high school and with the other schools.
Okay. And then question for the folks from Mark Thomas. Did you guys look at like the transit connectivity, or how some of these corridors are or are not served by transit?
Yeah, we did. So we do have transit included in the existing conditions analysis. We looked at local transit as well as regional transit services.
Good.
Hi. I have some interest in bicycle boulevards. So I wonder if we can pull up the presentation and perhaps go to the level of traffic stress for Shareway slide, or actually the state definition slide first.
Should be. There we go. Are you able to see my screen?
I can, thank you. Okay, so Class 3 shared lanes. This is a big list of those that we're planning on putting into Eureka, right? This is like
Class
big.
3 composes majority of the proposed recommendations, yes.
Okay, and so cars and bicycles are expected to properly share the roadway respectfully and safely. The roads that I see on here are kind of, they're main streets for people who live within Eureka. They're quick ways to get around, no stops until another major street they're the quick streets, like C Street in particular, or M Street, or there's dozens of them. But these streets, people are using them as a primary way to get around town, avoiding the signalized intersections. I'm talking about myself here. And when I'm on these roads, I do not necessarily see people going 25 miles per hour. What I see on here in our bottom left quadrant, Class 3 shared lanes, we have a beautiful bicycle boulevard here in a residential. That seems clearly like a single family, maybe multifamily home residential area. No parking. We have an island, and we have 20 mile per hour speed limits. I would be comfortable with my children bicycling on that road. But where we are right now, and with the behaviors that our drivers demonstrate, I'm not comfortable. Next slide, please.
Is this the one you
Yeah,
were looking for?
thank you very much. Okay, so I would say, gosh, my kids have no idea they can die. They're highly confident, but I'm not letting them ride on the streets. As far as me allowing them to go out and be kids in our community, which I would love to do, I'm comfortable with them riding at number 1, maybe number 2. So I guess it seems to me that people that are already adults largely already have their cars if they're going to have one, and that children are one of the primary target audiences for this array of services we're implementing. Hopefully we see a lot of adults capitalizing on these bike lanes and the bike network. I'm very concerned about spending our money on making just painting a sign of a bicycle in the middle of the roadway and calling it good. Because through my observations, it is absolutely not making those streets any safer. So can we have a discussion about this? Do we need to have a separate item?
Well,
Can we talk about the appropriateness of sharrows and bicycle boulevards in our city?
Yeah, I think I'd like maybe Jay or Paul, you guys could talk about some of the different tools that go into like a class 3. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying, you know, when you're talking about like just paint on the ground, you know, as far as like that level of a class 3, but there are kind of various spectrums of what that could look like. And for example, our C Street Bike Boulevard is going to look different than just that, given that we're trying to include flow diverters and other hardscape means to reduce the number of vehicles on there and also slow traffic down on those streets. But I think those are across the board. And again, Jane or Paul, if you want to step in and kind of talk about some of those pieces that we're anticipating for some of these streets, you know, kind of taking a step past just having paint on the ground, because like you said, that doesn't really change much. It just shows, you know, it's an indicator of people to share the road, but it doesn't give those hard cues or, you know, those visual cues or other things to slow people down or to make them more aware, or even just to try to eliminate any through traffic, like you're mentioning. People use those to get through. I don't know, Jay, Paul, do you guys have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe it would be beneficial to maybe review these 3 example treatments in a little bit more detail so we can get an understanding of how they help.
I don't need to know about the example treatments, and I understand how the various infrastructure options that we have at our disposal could slow traffic and help encourage safety on these roads. In particular, we've had M Street as a bicycle boulevard per signs and a large sharrow painted on the street for some time. And it didn't do anything good. And then I think we got another stop sign in the street. And that's been the treatment thus far. So I'd like to know what we're going to do if we're going to have that many. That's a huge list of sharrow streets.
Yeah, I think that, you know, M Street was something that we took on with our own local funds when it came to trying to start, you know, expanding our corridor. This process kind of came after. This is the first step in being able to have a good plan in place so that we can go after additional dollars to have, you know, the more higher price tag infrastructure that we're talking about here, whether it's the different things that we're talking about here that Jay was going to get to. And I think it is important to talk about those because those are what we're intending here. It's not intended to just be, you know, maybe what you saw on M Street, which is, you know, the beginning. There's not enough dollars to do everything we want to do at once. So we try to build a plan here. We try to be able to leverage that to be able to go after funds because now we have a lot of data. We have a lot of community outreach. We have things we can use in order to move forward with, you know, being more successful at bringing dollars in the community for these projects.
So what we're doing is we're taking ourselves kind of from zero to, hey, we have a network, right? Is that
more or less? I mean, we've had some streets that have bike lanes on them, right? But they've always been, those are, you know,
here and there where we have
the whole, you know, the kind of the how things have moved forward. Eureka has been catching up to that, right? So we're trying to do that. We're trying to make a big step forward with this plan so that we can be in a position to accelerate these some of these items where it makes sense in the prioritized areas.
I'm not super familiar with government grant world. Do we often see grant opportunities to like take a recently improved road and then bolster that more?
Sure. Yeah. H&I Streets improvements, those are grant-funded projects. The Street Bike Boulevard, while that's not in particular like a street that's been recently like paved and improved from that standpoint, but that doesn't remove the possibility for us, or not the possibility, it wouldn't take away the competitiveness that we would have going forward in a grant project for improvements to a street like M Street when it comes to the things, the metrics that, the state agencies and federal agencies are looking for in order to fund projects.
Yeah, I mean, looking at another large business, if you get ahead of the curve, then you end up losing the opportunity for free money. So, okay. All right. Thank you for talking about that.
Mark, I saw that you had kind of jumped forward as if you wanted to chime in on something for that. And
I was just going to say what the others had mentioned, that part of the Bike Boulevard thing is not just putting sharrows on the road, but also putting diverters and a bunch of other stuff that kind of changes the character of the road from a through street to in a car to you can get to your house if you need to sort of street.
Yeah. Do we have any examples of that yet?
In our town, no, but if you went to Portland or Berkeley or places like that.
Oh, yeah, I've been through Berkeley, all sorts of modal filters and whatnot back in the 90s. But
so hopefully we'll have some examples of that, I guess, is how I'm looking at it.
I guess we put this in, see where the problems are.
Yeah.
Hopefully get some vertical elements in. I'm a big fan of vertical elements.
Robert?
I was just going to pile on because piling on's fun. But I was just going to say, if we don't have any hard examples, it'd be nice as an exercise. If there's a long list of class 3s that we want to put in, going over some of the highest priority ones and actually just coming up with examples of what kinds of things we'd like to put in from our examples of infrastructure we could put in to shape the road, and then see if that actually seems like it's something that people would feel safe riding on just as a plan. It doesn't have to be anything we put in physically, but mocking up to see what it would do to shape traffic or affect the way people would drive down that road would be a lot easier to look at and say, like, this is good, this is something we'd approve, rather than just a list that says class 3 and then it's like, well, we have all these examples of things we could do. So, okay, can we get an example for this road that's particularly, high speed or doesn't really match what the example shows of a residential neighborhood with, fairly wide lanes and no street parking. In our specific example where there is a lot of street parking and blind corners and, our particular brand of drivers in Humboldt, if we can get just a hard example of what we could do, just, as a written down, drawn out plan, it could be helpful to visualize.
Yeah, I saw Wabash Avenue was on the list for the class 3, and I know Wabash at certain points has a separated bicycle lane. Would that mean that would go away, or would it?
And is not Wabash wide enough to add buffered bike lanes on both sides?
Yeah, I think there is currently bike lanes on part of it because I take that road, but that it kind of goes away at parts. So I was just kind of wondering if it's listed as for the class 3, does that mean it's going to be class 3 all the way, or what that looks like?
So there's the existing class 2 bicycle lanes on Wabash, and then the recommendation included is class 2 enhancements. So additional treatments that can be layered on top of those standard class 2 bike lanes in order to enhance visibility and increase comfort for the bicyclist, thus increasing visibility and lowering any traffic conflicts.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I was wondering, and this is a question for you, Jesse, when will the work on C Street start?
Yeah, it's a good question because that's a project that's already, we're funded for construction. We're starting design right now, so the intent is to have that project bid this early 2025, and then we would be in construction summer of 2025. So that one is right around the corner. I would like to say we have some information out on the website right now on that one, but I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. But we're certainly, we have some of the concepts that have been out there on that one. Those include kind of traffic diverters in areas along the corridor where we've kind of blocked through traffic from making, turns and going certain directions, so that while local traffic, as was mentioned before, can still find their way in there, it will kind of eliminate the through traffic. And there's some offset intersections where people kind of cut through, and those are going to be eliminated so that it's, much more difficult to make movements through there in vehicles that are not real safe or legal for that standpoint.
When you do have that project design ready, is that something where there will be a process? Has that already been approved, or does that go through a public process? Is that something where people can have input on what that design is?
I think we'd bring it back here. I think we'd, in the end, we're going to, the engineering design decisions will be what they are based on what was, kind of presented in the grant and everything to meet those. But yeah, that'll come back through TSC through probably this fall. Yeah. Because I've ridden M Street before too, and thought, well, we could just say every street is a bike boulevard, right? If all we're doing is painting it, right? Yeah. So it would be really great to actually see what some of those diverters are and what the plan is for that. Do y'all go bike C Street? Have you biked it? As has the engineering department gone out for? I've walked it. I have not biked it. Yeah. And then my other question was for Mark Thomas, I guess for all of you, but just like what happens next in this? So there's the draft, then there will be a final, and then it goes to the city council. Is there anything that those of us on the bike plan subcommittee have attended the task force meetings and things like that? But is there more that is needed in terms of public input that we could be doing something about?
In terms of public input, we feel confident in the amount of public input that we have collected throughout the 3 phases. As far as next steps goes, the city will be provided the tools that they need in order to pursue or start to pursue grant applications to fund the design and construction of the different corridors. At that time, as those projects are advancing, additional public engagement that is very focused on each individual corridor as it's advancing would of course be beneficial. So that is something that can be considered at later phases of network implementation. As far as what happens next immediately as part of the Eureka Bike Plan, we are still finalizing those draft concept designs. And then we're receiving feedback from the project task force on the draft report, and then we're presenting to city council. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So it sounds like as people who are on the project task force, we will receive that draft and be able to give input. Is that right? That's correct. Cool. Does anybody else? Yeah, Shanti.
I have a question that's partially, it's related, but I'm not sure if it's entirely. So tell me if this is a topic for another time. I'm curious about alleys in Eureka, and I know that they're not typically paved or maintained in any way, but I live on 3rd Street. So when I think about ways to create an environment that's safe for bicyclists and pedestrians, there's an alley that runs from the 255, actually further than that, but that intersection to Target and could easily be a safe route to the Waterfront Trail, for example. So I'm just curious, has there been any discussion at all about places where there are lengthy alleys and building infrastructure there to divert, so that bikes have a safe environment, and potentially less costly improvements, right, would be necessary?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We tried to make sure that we didn't constrain ourselves by just staying within the actual streets, but we looked at, and we really encouraged, when we had community engagement, what as users of the streets, alleys, sidewalks, the ways of the public traveled ways of Eureka, what are the best ways to get around town? So that was we tried to lead with we really want to know what's the on the ground understanding of how the network could work or could work better, and we did get a lot of feedback from folks of well, if you go, this route here and this cut over through here will take you around having to go around this, busy intersection and that sort of thing. So alleys were definitely kept on the table. We didn't necessarily, try to focus on let's try to send routes down alleys, but it was more if the corridors could use an alley or that sort of thing, we definitely, that was on the table. And I think it's important to keep in mind, this is not the forever plan for Eureka. This is a start of the plan that needs to continue to grow over time, because the network will change, ridership, usership, the community will change, and those things need to be continually upgraded with our plan. It needs to be a living document, so to speak,
I'm from the Bay Area, and it's unusual, at least where I'm from, Oakland, to have alleys. So what are alleys actually intended? Is it just for trash pickup? Because that's only one day of the week. So no, I'm serious, like, as being from a place where we don't have alleys, what are they actually intended for?
I'll be quick about this because it's a little off topic. But alleys, I think originally intended, the streets were laid out in a gridded network, 100 years ago with alleys. So I think at the time that was kind of the approach, where you can get access through a back way, whether it's a driveway, you can have your trash there, you have a garage off there, kind of provide more access to your property, I guess. But or they're used for utilities. Oftentimes we'll have water, sewer, different utilities will be in the alleyway to provide access in certain parts of the city where there's, for whatever reason, there might be difficult to have a fronting main for water, sewer, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's generally.
The other thing that alleys are good for is not having driveways that go out onto the road. And so if you're riding along, you don't have to watch out, or the drivers, watch for bikes so much as they're going in and out of their garages or driveways.
I will say there have been some efforts in some cities to convert alleys from being, the trash lane into like more of like a community space or something like that, which is interesting, but also like really costly. But the one thing they are really great for is like if you have something, you need to do something like unload an appliance or, something that you couldn't really do in the travelway area, something that might block a sidewalk or something that might block a traffic lane. That's a really good thing for alleys. They're not so much for through traffic as things that could be obstructing. And I know, for me as a pedestrian, because I actually walk down 3rd Street, from time to time, there are missing sidewalks on 3rd Street, which I hope engineering will address. But I also don't really like the idea that as a bicyclist or as a pedestrian, you should be relegated to the alley with the trash.
Only one day a week.
Yeah. But the streets, the sidewalks, those are for people, not just cars. Whereas the alley is a bit more of a multi-use, could be storage, could be pick up and drop off, could be utilities or something like that. But if you need the spot to unload your moving truck is the alley. That's a great place for it.
Anybody else have any bike plan questions or anything? Cool. So we'll just wait for the draft to come out. And I guess I would say that I encourage you all as you're coming up with your grant applications for these class 3 lanes to really shoot for the moon and ask for a lot of money so that we can actually have hardscaping and things that do calm traffic on those streets. Cool. And so since this is a report, we don't usually take public comment on them. We'll move on to subcommittee updates. The first of which is the bike plan subcommittee. Y'all have anything to report? We're just going to wait for a draft.
Yeah, we've not much has happened in our role since then. Last time.
Yeah, we just had a report. So we just had a report on the bike committee sub. So the City of Eureka Neighborhood Street Closures Subcommittee, do you have anything to report out on?
Yes. So last month, I went and walked and canvassed Cedar Street between California and A Street. There are approximately 6 dwelling units on the north side of the street, counting this kind of duplex that I think technically the address is on A Street, but and then there's 2 single-family homes and an apartment building on the south side of the street. I talked to 2 residents on the north side of the street. The first one was very enthusiastic about slow streets. And pretty much all of the people I talked to were really the main problem is on California Street. Can you do something with that? And I'm like, I'm sorry, that is not something we can slow street. The second person I talked to was a little like non-committal, just kind of like, yeah, okay. And then the third person I talked to was on the other side of the street, and he was a little confused as to why Cedar Street was chosen. And I said, well, we were told that there was, complaints about speeding and stuff like that here, and that sort of thing. He said, oh, well, most of that was actually because of the Eagles Lodge, over there that now appears to be closed. And we talked a little bit about the Eagles. My grandpa was an Eagle, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. But of the people I spoke with, nobody was like strongly opposed. I don't see any of them here today. I made sure to leave the brochure, at any of the houses where no one answered the door or anything like that. Left as many as I could at the apartment complex, which, wasn't like I could hit every door or anything like that, because, and that's about all with that. Any questions?
Do you just wait for people to respond to it and see if there's interest? Like what happens next?
That might actually be a better question for Kelly at this point. I mean, I don't know if you guys have received any feedback. Yeah, that I did not.
No, we haven't got any feedback. The next step would be for you to get a petition, a 50+1, from everyone on the street to us to be able to move forward.
Yes, I guess we will figure out when we want to do that.
Cool. And we had at a recent meeting discussed bringing back together the reviving the Transportation Safety Action Plan subcommittee. And I don't know that any progress has been made on that. I think you weren't here, Philip, and we kind of wanted to see if that was a thing that you were interested in participating in.
I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
I actually requested for that to be put on the agenda for a future meeting to put that subcommittee back together and figure out how to proceed.
Okay. Because you were also interested as well. Okay.
Yes.
And there was one other person.
I don't remember who.
Was it? It might have been me too. Yeah. Okay. So do we just like process wise, do we need to put that on the agenda to redo it, or could we make that decision now to do subcommittee? And that can be 3 of us, correct? Cool.
Yeah, I think we can just make if that's so there's Philip. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can. No, we just need to. So next step, we can set up a meeting and get that rolling.
And it was pointed out to me after that discussion about it, because we talked about Vision Zero, and I was reminded that actually the city put out a proclamation probably a couple of years ago that did commit to Vision Zero. So I think that that's something that, because I don't see that reflected in the most recent TSAP.
Yeah, definitely noted and anticipated.
Okay, then we've got future agenda items. Is there anything to mention on these future agenda items or questions?
I might request to consider adding one.
Okay.
I'm interested in seeing the planned treatment for 14th between in the area where the fish passage work is happening on the south side of Cooper Gulch, and in particular, what kind of public services are planned to be added in that space. It's really quite a wide road. It has a sidewalk halfway on one side and quite a bit of traffic, quite a bit of foot traffic due to the large green space next door.
So is that an item on that particular project, or improvements for 14th Street, I guess, in general?
I'm curious to see the planned treatment for the space that will be altered for the fish passage program.
Okay. Yeah, let's
We can talk on the side.
yeah, we can talk on the side on
Yeah.
that. We might be able to get some information to help you out with that. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Althea?
I think like what Raylena brought up in public comment and another comment I got from a member of the public the other day, I think we should perhaps explore, having 4-hour business or 8-hour residential permits in, certain areas around town, especially downtown, especially Raylena, I'm looking at you. If ACGC is willing to give up some of that 2-hour parking right there around the new building, and allow your residents and your contractors, but also probably a couple of the other residents in that area to maybe use that. Okay. So yeah, 4-hour, 8-hour permit parking in Old Town.
Yeah, we might. We'll put that on the list, and I think we'd like a little more time to let it kind of play out too, and see what kind of. We're getting a lot of feedback, and we're issuing a lot of those permits for the parking lots, and so. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Put on the list.
Is I forget, how long is that pilot supposed to go? Is there a projected end date, or is it just kind of up in the air?
I think we had it for about a year, but I don't. That's not a hard and fast date either.
Okay. Do we have any other future agenda item questions or comments? Yeah, I know. There's all this protocol here, really, Raylena. But I guess I could call you up if you have an answer to that. Sure. Yeah. It's just us here.
It lives on forever, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say anecdotally that, we have one resident in particular who has gotten no less than 8 parking tickets. And so one of the things that I've seen, I know that there isn't, so just to back it up a little bit, there's residential and business parking that's allowed within the lots only. However, the lots aren't being monitored. So you have both an allocation of space there, but that isn't being checked. And so whether or not you have a permit doesn't matter at this point. It matters if you're on the street. So one other thing to consider is checking the lots for people who don't have passes. And I know it's an early implementation, but maybe a cute little, hey, scan this QR code to get signed up, because it's, for a lot of people who aren't familiar with OpenGov, it's a complicated and daunting process, but, a little bit more communication, maybe with pictures, so that everyone's clear and on the same page, because even I myself was confused at like the where and what and how of the pilot program, but I'm sure it's things that'll all get worked out in time. Thanks.
So I feel like the parking program was before my time. Yeah, it's on. Green light. I don't remember talking about it. Was this something that we put in place before I joined, maybe?
I think it might have been, because it's been over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way, is there information available on the website or something like that I can look up, or if we can talk about it again in the future?
Yeah, we can represent that. And I think that in general, I think that's fine. It's it's a new thing. It's certainly something that is we're working through, and I think as far as the lot as was brought up, supervision. We're kind of transitioning into trying to identify the best way to kind of change how that's working right now. There's paid meters there that we're kind of transitioning out of into a different method to operate those lots. So there's some change on the horizon there with that. Hopefully the more near-term horizon, but it seems to be a challenge. So we're working through that.
So outside of this direct feedback we're getting from public comment, have we gotten any feedback, or are we gathering how are we gathering data around whether this is going successfully or if there's problems, other than hoping somebody comes in to give us some feedback?
Yeah, we have we have we receive a lot of calls on it, and we're the Public Works. We implement the parking permits, so we get a lot of phone calls. I mean, that's the number that they have to call, so they report in. We track a lot of the what comes through those calls as far as the information that's coming in, and we're certainly seeing we're trying to get the information updated in more different places and try to get it as out there as possible when it comes to the information, because I think some things people are missing, and then they pick it up, and it's really it's a process. It's new, it's new things, and I think those are always challenging things. So again, that's why we're doing this pilot program. We're trying to let it have some time to implement, but I think it would be good to bring back some data and talk about it here. But I do think we need a little more time for it to go into effect before we do that, so it has a chance to kind of level out a little bit.
Thanks. Was there anything else that anybody has questions about any of these or other? We all know how to present a future agenda items if we want them. And unless anybody has anything, shall we adjourn until August 13th at 3:30 p.m. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.
Thanks.